Hi everyone, my name's Josh Creaser. I'm part of the national team here at 350 Australia and one of the coordinators of the Power for Change campaign. Thanks for having me along to your event this evening, and it's great to know that you're watching this film because you and others in your community are getting ready to be active in the campaign to stand up to Australia's biggest polluting companies. You're going to see me twice this evening. First, I'm going to take a little time to talk about the strategy behind the Power for Change campaign, and then I'll come back after you've had a chance to take part in some of the complaint actions tonight to talk through where your group could go from here and how you could remain active in your community. So let's start with a sense of what the problem is that we're dealing with. Despite us seeing and feeling the impacts of climate change here and now, Australia continues to be a laggard when it comes to shutting down our dirty and polluting fossil fuels and transitioning to clean energy. Our federal politicians have shown their reckless behaviour over the previous few months. We've been more likely to see coal in Parliament than a sensible debate about how we can transition to clean energy. Australia has the fourth most carbon intensive electricity system anywhere in the world. So we should be a leader with our abundant wind and sun in making that transition to clean and reliable energy. Coal power is hurting us as well. It costs our economy $2.6 billion a year because of the health impacts when people breathe in the toxic pollutants that are made when we burn coal. And our gas market has been completely co-opted by a gas cartel that has fracked and dug up gas across millions of hectares of land in Queensland and New South Wales, and is now exporting that gas as LNG in vast quantities, which has pushed up the price here for us in Australia and has contributed to exporting more and more fossil fuels to the world around us. It's clear that in this term of government, we're not going to see leadership on the issue of climate, on the issue of transitioning to clean energy from our national government. We've seen some moves from the state governments. ACT and Victoria and South Australia are making good progress towards renewable energy. But still a lot more could be done by New South Wales and Queensland and all those states to make sure we have plans to close down fossil fuel plants and transition quickly to clean energy. And there are three companies that often are missed when we talk about the reason we have such a dirty and polluting energy system: AGL, Origin and Energy Australia. And those who I'm going to tell you a bit more about now. These three companies are collectively known as the big polluters, and they're the target in the Power for Change campaign. These three companies dominate our electricity market. They have over 70% of all the retail contracts. They generate over 70% of the energy that's sold in the market. And they have spent years campaigning and lobbying our politicians to set up this broken energy system that we have. They were the big players pushing for the coal assets in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria to be privatised and to go into corporate hands at bargain prices. They've influenced the rules of the market at all levels, state and federal policy, to ensure that it prioritises them and their profits over clean energy. And they use their market domination to game the system and to push up power prices to earn greater profits. It's in the interest of the big polluters to position themselves as friendly companies that want to support climate action and transitioning to clean energies. That's the brand position that they want to have. However, they're working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that they can profit as much as possible from their existing coal and gas power stations. They want to lock in a shift out of coal and gas that will take decades. They want to put in place policies that will ensure they can continue to pump out toxic air pollutants that are hurting our health and not have to pay the price. They've messed with the rules to ensure that the uptake of renewables is slowed and that it prioritises investments that they can make, not their competitors. And they're also pushing for a whole lot of new gas to be dug up, to be fracked, and for new gas power stations to be built for that gas to be burnt in. And it's very clear, all the climate science shows that we cannot have more fossil fuel investment and construction of any form if we're to have the best chance of averting the worst impacts of climate change. Now, each of these companies, AGL, Origin and Energy Australia, brings with them a whole series of dirty secrets. We could spend a long time talking about them. I'm not going to do that right now, but I would encourage you to look at the big polluters fact sheet that we've handed out this evening, which has a whole lot more detail on what each of these companies gets up to. So we've talked a bit about the problem, our broken energy system, and Australia's addiction to climate pollution. But what needs to change and how we're going to do it? Our vision is that by 2030 at the very latest, Australia will be 100% powered by clean energy from the wind and the sun. So how are we going to do that? Well, the strategy that's been developed is to first focus on two of the key influences over the federal government, and through doing that to build up a powerful grassroots movement that can then influence the state of politics in this country. So as I mentioned earlier, the state governments have a big role to play here. They, to different extents, are already supporting the uptake of renewable energy and can go a lot further. So part of the strategy is to build campaigns around the upcoming elections in the various states, New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria and South Australia, to ensure that those governments are backing in ambitious renewable energy plans, and also that they have plans in place to help the closure of coal power stations. So that's one arm of it. The other arm is to take on the big polluters, to challenge their political access and influence over both the states and the federal government, and to also build up pressure from their customers and from the communities in which they operate to ensure that they don't get away with their plans to keep burning coal and gas for decades to come. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight. It's about building a decentralised, powerful grassroots movement that can first influence state governments and the big polluters, and then in future federal elections and with future governments, champion and get them to back a plan for 100% clean energy. Now that's a lot to talk about and that's a lot to do. So how on earth are we going to make that happen? Well, fortunately, as 350 and as the Power for Change campaign, we're not in this alone. There's a whole range of groups that are already out there embracing clean energy and running awesome local campaigns. And there's also a number of national organisations that are ready to collaborate in this space to get us to that vision of 100% clean energy. So just briefly, the organisations that we're collaborating with already are the Australian Conservation Council, the Australian Conservation Foundation, the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales, Environment Victoria, and Solar Citizens. Now, each of those organisations is focusing on the state governments, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia, and working with their members and supporters and local groups to get strong clean energy commitments out of those state governments. The other side of it is the big polluters, as I've mentioned, and that's where 350 comes in with the Power for Change campaign, standing up to those companies that have kept us shackled to fossil fuels for far too long, and to build pressure on them to close down their coal plants, not build new gas, and to transition to clean energy. So let's talk a bit more about Power for Change and how we're going to do that. Well, there's two key ideas here. The first is harnessing the power of customers. For these companies, their brand and their reputation in the public and with their customers is everything. They're major retail entities and they pour millions of dollars every year into maintaining their public image. So part of Power for Change is getting hundreds, thousands of customers to start putting pressure on these companies internally through making complaints like you have this evening, and then to also become strong advocates in their networks, talking with their family, friends and colleagues about why they are no longer happy getting their energy from a big polluter, and letting the public know and letting the companies know that they will divest their houses from AGL, Origin or Energy Australia if they don't see real action from these companies to clean up the mess that they've got us into. And of course, if these companies don't start to listen to us, don't start to respond and show us that they're going to get out of fossil fuels, then we will be creating big moments later in the year around around the AGMs of these companies, where customers come out en masse and all publicly declare that they've switched to a clean energy provider and they're no longer going to be involved with the big polluters. So that's how we can take action as customers of the big polluters and use our voice as individuals with our families to put pressure on these companies. But it's also critical that we are building this as a grassroots and community-led campaign, and that we're taking action collectively. All powerful social movements in the past that have taken on corporations and taken on governments and got real positive change have had a structure of local groups that meet regularly, support one another and take action together. And so later on in the evening, we'll be talking a bit more about how you could start a group in your community So for now, I'm going to hand it back to your host to talk more about how you can put some pressure on the companies right now by making some complaints. And I'll be back later in the evening to talk more about where to from here.